Are you experienced? Our story opens in a semi-dream state where the boundaries of consciousness are not yet fully formed and anything is possible. The song begins in twilight and ends in sunrise. My favorite things. It's about mid-morning when our protagonist is at his most creative and focused, after a couple cups of coffee and still feeling inspired by the dream he was having just before sunrise. He's writing a song about everything he can remember from his dream and decides that the best way to tie it all together is to just write it in a list format. The only thing he is having trouble with is the line, "my favorite things." He thinks it bland and pedestrian, but figures he can retool it later. The core of the song is promising and a surefire hit. He is pleased with himself. He smiles as he folds and places it in his back pocket for later as he goes to answer the door. By this time, it's just after 12 noon. His friend Joe has brought lunch and lays 3 bags on the counter in a hurry and says, "I gotta hit the bathroom." On his way there, he tells our man to help himself. Our man, who forgot to eat breakfast, is famished. Not sure which bag is which, he reaches in, grabs and eats the first thing he touches. Then, suddenly, painted black, his perceptions of light and sound and textures seem to have been altered, but he is not sure what hit him. Joe, returning from the bathroom, sees his friend with enormous pupils and a dazed expression. "What the fuck happened to you, man?" Then he sees the open bag. "Oh no, you ate the brownies, dude. I was saving those for later." So Joe decides it's best to take the other one, as he believes he would have more fun as a sidekick than as a caretaker. Might as well. After a little while, they completely forget lunch and instead, jockey full of bourbon. They wander around the French Quarter in a haze. Joe notices our man's pants and asks, "Are those jockey pants?" Our man nods in the affirmative. Hours later, they wind up at a crowded bar for one final nightcap. Our man completely sobers up when he sees her dancing by herself under a revolving disco ball with a spotlight. Time stands completely still, and the bar appears to be suddenly empty. His eyes never leave her as he slowly walks up and asks her name. "Fire. Laura," she whispers, and they slow dance to this song. Turn, turn, turn. He takes her back to his place. Before too long, it becomes apparent that even though his mind had sobered up, the rest of his body had some catching up to do, and he was unable to complete the act of love. Then he completely passes out. The next morning, he is relieved to find her there and tries to explain why his body couldn't follow through with what his mind so wanted. Before he could begin, she put a finger to his lips and paraphrased a verse from the book of Ecclesiastes. "To everything there is a season." Then begins a montage sequence of an afternoon of fun, and it feels like he's living his entire life with Laura in the space of that song, being born, dying, laughing, weeping, etc. The song ends as he is pushing Laura on a merry-go-round while she eats an ice cream cone. As they sit down to rest on a park bench, he excitedly tells her about the song he has in his pants pocket. Satisfaction. Little did they know that a nefarious character was making his way through the park. He was a frustrated songwriter who also harbored a resentment towards the women he tried to approach, but who never seemed to give him any reaction. He was angry and desperate. As he gets close to Laura and our man, he hears him tell Laura that the paper in his hand would one day be a hit song. Seeing the opportunity to change his fortune, the stranger whacks our man on the head and snatches the paper from his hands. Laura screams and tries to grab the stranger. Our man blacks out and slumps over. Twin Peaks. Our man awakens confused and disoriented to find Laura strangled. He is distraught and heartbroken. He searches her wallet for any more information about her. Her ID reads Laura Palmer. A policeman discovers him holding the contents of Laura's wallet and arrests him on the spot. Folsom Prison Blues. Act 2 opens with our man in prison because he couldn't afford a proper attorney. His cellmate won't stop prattling on about how he shot a man in Reno just to watch him die. To add insult to the injury of being wrongly accused in the murder of his beloved, he tries to lose himself in the prison feature film that evening and finds that his stolen song had been completely ripped off in a film called The Sound of Music. But who killed Laura Palmer, he muttered. As the end credits roll, he finds the answer was either Rogers or Hammerstein. Bastards, he mumbled. Dance of the Sugar Plum Fairy. As the nights wore on, he found his only refuge in the dreams of Laura Palmer, who curiously appeared each night dressed as a sugar plum fairy. Something. During the day, he could not stop daydreaming of her to pass the time until he could be reunited with his sugar plum fairy, even if only in a dream. And I love her. One day he vowed to confess his true feelings to her the same night because he knew this love of his would never die, even if she was, in fact, dead. Sadly, he would never get his chance because she never came. The next morning, he awakened to a note on his chest. Runaway. My dearest John Collins, by the time you read this, I will be long gone. Even prison dream fairies come up for parole, so I had to take my chance. I'm kind of tired of the tutu and toe shoes every night. Please don't try to find me. It's for the best. But I promise I will leave the gate open for you tomorrow. All my love, Laura Palmer. Electric Lotus Lullaby. True to her word, Laura did leave the huge fortified barbed wire gate open. Even though he was crushed, he hadn't realized she didn't like his choice of fairy fantasy costume. He felt he should release her memory. He went to a new town, changed his name to Colin John. He took up yoga and plays this song every night. And that is the story of the Electric Lotus.